Hey guys, so this is part 2 of our quiz review from our scavenger hunt. So we are on the 8th one if you were following along. We want to simplify the square root. So we want to figure out what all can multiply to get us to this grand total of negative 300. So I first want to take care of this negative. So under my square root, I've got negative 1 times this 300. Once I take out my negative, I can deal with this 300. So 300, I'm going to make a factor tree out of what goes into 300. So the obvious one is 300 and 100, because 3 times 100 is 300. What times what gives us 100? 10 and 10. 10 times 10 gives us 100. So then I want to separate my 10s out. 2 and 5 multiplied together gives us 10. 2 and 5 again for my 10. So in my square root, I have negative 1 times my 3 times my 2 times my 5 times my 2 times another 5. I was looking at the bottom of my factor tree. Now I'm looking for pairs. So I have a pair of 2's that are going to get together, get married, move out of the house, and become 1. So that's going to be on the outside. I also have a pair of 5's. They're also going to get together, get married, move out of the house, become 1. This negative 1 under the square root is also going to become an I and move out. That's its independent self. So I have a 2, I have a 5, and I have an I outside. Now there's still multiplication under here, so that multiplication comes with it. What's left under the square root is a 3, so I have the square root of 3. And then we're going to simplify. So I have 2 times 5, which is 10, times I, because it's a letter, I don't have to put that that multiplication sign, times the square root of 3. And this is your answer. This answer should have been found on this next one, which is factor and solve. 2x squared plus 3x plus 5. This one I'm going to slide and divide. So I'm going to take my a, or my 2, move it over by multiplication. So I have x squared plus 3x plus 10. Big X method. My c goes on my right side. My 3 goes on my left. What times what gives you 10, but also adds to give you 3. Adds or subtract to give you 3. It's 2 and 5. So which one needs to be negative? Well, 5 plus 2 doesn't give you 3. 5 minus 2, that gives you 3. So 2 needs to be negative. So then we use our parentheses. Again, the variable that we're using in this one is x. We haven't used any u's or anything. So we have x minus 2, which is our magic number, and then x plus 5, because 5 was one of our magic numbers. So we slid 2 over, so we're going to have to divide by 2 down here. So 2 divided by 2 gives us a whole number of 1, so we can simplify. 5 divided by 2 is not a whole number, so we slide it in front of the x. So we have 2x plus 5. Now that is our factored form. In this problem, we were asked to solve. If it says solve, we have to have our x equals. We have to set our parentheses equal to 0. So our x minus 1, set it up equal to 0. I get x equals positive 1. My second parentheses, 2x plus 5 equals 0. I'm going to move the 5 over by subtraction because it's positive. I get 2x equals negative 5. I'm going to divide by 2 because there's multiplication and I want the x by itself. And I'm left with x equals negative 5 over 2. So if you were looking for the answer for this one, which is the 9th one, I have x equals 1 and negative 5 over 2. That should have been your answer. All right. That answer should have been found on the top of our next square root simplify one. So this one was the same thing as our 300. So I want to first take care of that negative 1. And then I'm going to separate out the 108. Again, if you are sitting there can't think of what goes into 108, realize it's an even number. So you can always divide by 2 if you need to. 2 and 54. Again, 54 is an even number, so go ahead and take that 2 out. Don't strain yourself over thinking about what goes in these numbers. If it's an even, try 2. If it's an odd, typically a 3 can go into it, or a 7, or 11. So 27 can be separated as 3 and 9. And then our 9s can be separated as 3 and 3. So I'm looking at all of the bottom of my factor tree, and that is what's going under my square root. So I have the square root, negative 1 times 2 2's and 3 3's. So I'm looking for what I can take outside of the house or outside of the square root. So my negative 1 can go on the outside as an I. My 2 2's can become 1, get married, and move out. And my 2 3's can get married and also move out as 1. So I have 2 times 3 times I. And what's left under the square root is a 3. So I'm going to simplify. 2 times 3 gives me 6. And then I have my I, square root of 3. And my 6i times the square root of 3 is my answer for simplifying negative 108 under the square root. This answer should have been found on the top of factor and solve x to the 4th minus x squared minus 30 equals 0. This one, gotta realize on your own, this 4 is different than we're used to. So we have to do something extra. We have to use. So again, u equals x squared. So we're going to rewrite it. My x to the 4th converts to u squared minus u minus 30. So I'm gonna find my magic numbers. I'm factoring this step now. Negative 30, negative 1. What times what gives you negative 30, but also add or subtract to give you negative 1. You should get negative 6 and 5. So you're going to put it into a factored form. Again, using your u's because that's what you were factoring. Negative 6 and positive 5 because it's positive. I'm going to substitute my x squares back into my parentheses. Then I'm going to solve because they said solve. So x squared minus 6 equals 0. For this one, you can get x squared by itself and then square root it. So I have x squared equals positive 6. Take the square root from both sides. I'm left with x equals plus or minus the square root of 6. Now I have to have plus or minus because this square root, you could have 2 times 2, and it would still give you this x squared. I could change it to negative 2 times negative 2, it still would give me positive 4. That is why you have to add this plus or minus. So plus or minus the square root of 6 is one answer. Our second parentheses, x squared plus 5 equals 0. We have x squared equals negative 5. Simplifying by taking the square root of both sides. We have x equals, I can take this negative out, move it out, because it's the square root negative 1 times 5. So the negative 1's moving outside of the house. So I have plus or minus I times the square root of 5. So if you're looking for your answer in the scavenger hunt, it is x equals plus or minus the square root of 6 and plus or minus I times the square root of 5. That should have been your answer. This should have been found on our very last one, which is your number 12. Factor and solve x to the 4th plus 40 equals 13x squared. So we want our exponents in descending order. So first we want our x to the 4th plus, actually that's going to be subtract. We're going to move our 13 over by subtracting. So we have subtract 13x plus 40 equals 0. Then I'm going to substitute my u's in. So I'm going to break it down. So I got u squared minus 13u plus 40. Then I'm going to factor. So I have 40 and negative 13. My magic numbers, if I think about it, two numbers that multiply together to give you 40, but also add or subtract to give you negative 13, is negative 5 and negative 8. Going into parentheses, again, we're not factoring our x's right now, we're factoring our u's. So when we put in to our parentheses, we have u first, and then our magic numbers. So 5 was negative, so we have to subtract 5. Our 8 is negative as well, so we have to subtract 8. Then we have to substitute our x squares back in. So we have x squared minus 5, x squared minus 8. We're going to solve. Again, it says solve, so we have to solve. Setting it equal to 0, so x squared minus 5 equals 0. I have x squared equals positive 5 because I add it to the other side. Taking the square root of both sides, x equals plus or minus the square root of 5. You do have to have the plus or minus. X squared minus 8 equals 0 for our second parentheses. We have to move the negative 8, so we have x squared equals 8. Taking the square root, we have x equals, now we can simplify the square root of 8. All of the other ones we could not. So our 8, we have 2 and 4, and our 4's spread out or factor out to 2 and 2. So we would have the square root of 2 times 2 times 2. 2 2's become one, get married, move out, and become 1. So in our answer, we have our plus or minus, our 2 that moved out, and our 2 that was left over in our square root. So our answer is x equals plus or minus the square root of 5 and plus or minus 2 times the square root of 2. So that should have been our answer for the very last one. And this answer would have been found on the first one I did on the first video that I did.